Hi, this is Catherine Schneider from the Fitchburg Historical Society. This morning we are so honored to welcome Phil Haslanger to be our guest. Phil is a journalist and editor at the Capital Times from 1973 to 2008. He was ordained in the United Church of Christ in 2007, served as pastor at Memorial United Church of Christ from 2008 to 2017. And after retiring from ministry, he was named to the board of the University of Wisconsin-Madison Journalism School's Center for Journalism Ethics, and in 2021 was inducted into the Wisconsin Newspaper Hall of Fame. So welcome, Phil.
Thank you. Thank
So
you. It's good to be here with you.
Thank you. We're so glad you're here with us. Well, to just start out, finding out more about your story, you have rather a unique background, having worked in journalism and as both a reporter, journalist, editor at the Cap Times for many years, and then being ordained in 2007 and serving as pastor at Memorial United Church of Christ here in Fitchburg. So the question is, what brought about your career change? And then what do you see as the intersection maybe of faith and journalism?
Yes, I've always been involved and interested in religion throughout my life. When I was in high school and college, I was in a Catholic seminary thinking about being a priest. So the idea of serving as a minister was not new in my life. Came down to UW when I was a junior and got a degree in sociology, and then got a degree in journalism and went to work at the Cap Times. And that was really good, but stayed involved with church stuff over the years. In 2000, my wife and I shifted from the Catholic Church to the United Church of Christ, and in a moment that I think should be etched on my tombstone, said, let's not get very involved. And you can see how well that worked. And then started working in sort of as a lay minister at a few churches, and then got on the ordination track and got ordained in 2007, still working part-time at the Cap Times at that point. And then became associate pastor part-time at Fitchburg, Memorial in Fitchburg in 2007, full-time as pastor in 2009. And at that point also left the paper. And so, you know, there are two different kinds of worlds. Journalists, by training, have to be skeptical of what's going on and see if you can get to the facts. People in church put a lot of emphasis on belief, so I say I get to straddle the world of skepticism and belief, and I think that's a really good place to be.
It keeps your mind and spirit active, does it not?
Exactly.
Great. Great. Well, let's get into the history of Memorial United Church of Christ on East Lacey Road, right here in Fitchburg. So what are the roots of the church, which celebrated its 100th anniversary in 2017?
Correct.
So how it got its name, who made up the original congregation, maybe where it was located, and then particularly maybe for Fitchburg, what were the reasons for moving out here to Fitchburg?
So there were in the 1910s, the decade of 1910 to 1920, was a period of growth in Madison. A lot of people were coming in, and a lot of Swiss folks from the New Glarus area were coming up here to work at the university. There was this new meat packing plant called Oscar Mayer something or other.
We're familiar with that.
Yeah. And you know, state government was expanding, the university was expanding. 1916, I think, was the first year there were more cars than horses in Madison. So there was a lot happening. So Swiss people were coming up, and they joined a German Presbyterian church downtown. And after a couple of years, they said, oh, we want to be in the Swiss United Church, Swiss Reformed Church, which is where they were from in New Glarus. A little different. They wanted their own Reformed church here. So in 1916, they started meeting in a home, and they got enough people to let's have a congregation. And on June 10th, 1917, they met in the Hall of the Grand Army of the Republic, Civil War Veterans, which is right downtown where the State Department of Justice building is now. And signed their charter, and I think there were 64 members or something like that who got it started. And then they bought a house behind what's now Bethel Lutheran Church. That house is no longer there, but they used that as their church for many years. In the 1940s, they moved over to Madison Street, kind of near DW Fieldhouse, and they had a church there for many years. In the 1980s, people had moved out around the community because they were no longer so attached to Swiss Reformed and all of that kind of thing. the congregation was aging. There were virtually no children in it. They thought they were going to, probably go out of business. The United Church of Christ regional organization said, we're looking at places to put a new congregation. Fitchburg has a lot of potential for that. Would you consider going out there, moving your congregation? There was, of course, a discussion, but ultimately there was a vote. Yes, let's go ahead and do that. So they began building this church on Lacey Road. Interesting little tidbit. The Lutheran Church around the same time, there was the American Lutheran Church and the Lutheran Church of America. They merged to form what's now the ELCA. All Saints Lutheran, which is on PD, was one side of that. The Lutherans also had this property on Lacey Road that had been given to them specifically for use as a church. So they didn't need now two Lutheran churches within a few blocks of each other. Conveniently, that was when Memorial was looking for property. So they were able to buy the property from the Lutherans, build a church there. So it opened in 1989. Early on, there were children, and people were very excited that there were children coming to church again because they were reaching out to the families in the Fitchburg area. So that's what brought Memorial out there. You asked about the name, which was something I was trying to track on. End of World War II was a memorial of people who were killed in, or World War I, end of people killed in World War I. It was all about money. They named it Memorial in the hopes that people would give memorial gifts in honor of people they loved.
So that's the origin of the word memorial.
Yeah.
That's so interesting.
Isn't it? Like, okay.
And the name has been there ever since.
Absolutely.
And it stuck. Great. Let's talk a little bit about the architecture of the church itself.
Sure.
Because architecture many times reveals the beliefs of the members of the church. People driving by, I think, on Lacey Road and see Memorial United Church of Christ see a rather unique design and distinct design. Would you talk about the design choices maybe and their meaning?
Sure. In the sort of irreverent side of it, when I try and describe where we are, I say we're the spaceship that landed on Lacey Road. Oh yeah, I know that place. But actually, there was an architect from Fort Atkinson named Helmut Yango, and when he was designing the church, he met with church members and said, what are the things that are important to you? And they talked about, we want a space for worship, we want a space for education, we want a space for social gathering. So 3 dimensions to the life there. In the Christian theology, there's often talk about the Trinity, God a creator, God a redeemer, God a spirit. So that apparently wasn't articulated very clearly at the time, but it certainly is reflected in what's there. Then the steeple has 3 openings in it. So that sense of 3, of Trinity, of worship, education, social place, really defined what the church hoped to be when it was here. Over the years, there have been 2 additions to the church, and they try to, maintain the integrity of the original design in doing that. I had the honor of doing a wedding there for Helmut Yango's granddaughter and her now husband. So he was there. And so I was a little nervous about what did he think about the expansion? And I had it all figured out. If he didn't like it, well, I wasn't here when they did it. And if he did like it, I'd thank him very much. Well, he did like it. He said they really did a good job. So that was good to hear.
Great. How interesting to make that connection then with the wedding actually taking place in the church. Well, keeping a church community vibrant is always a challenge, isn't it? And in what ways do the Memorial United Church of Christ church members live out that motto that they have, which is a welcoming community growing together in Christ?
Yeah, and I think one of the things that people have said, particularly in the last quarter century, which is the part, I actually know a little bit more about and know people who are there. When people come to visit, they talk about there's somebody always welcoming them in, making them feel comfortable. People talk about sort of a friendly spirit of the congregation that brings people in. But also, a lot of the emphasis on Memorial has been, what can we do to reach out to the community around us and do things? Which also makes connections with people beyond the walls of the church and gives people in the community like, I could come here to do a music program. I could come here to do, they have a craft and cookie sale at Christmas time, brings in a lot of people. So there's that kind of interaction that happens that makes the church connect with the community, and I think in part is part of that welcoming feeling.
Right, great. And of course, the Memorial United Church of Christ is located in Fitchburg and the broader Madison
Right.
community and area. Would you like to name maybe some of the ways that the church reaches out into the community?
Sure, sure. It has a long history of doing that. Again, going back to when it was before it moved to Fitchburg, it was the original office space for what's now Grace Hospice. It was part of creating an organization then known as Madison Urban Ministry, now known as Justine with Just Bakery. It's still connected. Just Bakery, which gives people returning from incarceration or with other particular challenges in their life training in baking skills. They sell their bakery at Memorial on one Sunday morning a month. While I was there, we worked with several other churches in the Fitchburg area to create what's called an Essentials Pantry, which is located at what was Arbor Covenant Church on McDivitt Road, just outside of the boundary of Fitchburg, but kind of near the bonfire grill and such. And so it's people gather personal essentials, toothpaste, toilet paper, tampons, things that people cannot normally get at food pantries. So with other churches, it's been part of doing that. The church has been supporting the Black Women's Wellness Project financially over the last 2 years. So there's a variety of ways that the church has tried to connect to the broader community.
And it sounds like ways in which the community's needs are there
Yes, yeah.
that the church can meet.
Right, exactly.
And while you were pastor, to kind of continue this conversation, can you elaborate on how you involve faith leaders in these, in the Fitchburg community?
Sure. So there were a couple of things that were happening simultaneously. One is I was talking to other churches about what might we do that could provide service to the community, and that the Personal Essentials Pantry grew out of that conversation. At the same time, Sean Poff was then mayor of Fitchburg, and he said, I'd like to get together with pastors and, talk to them about what we're doing here. So at first it was just like, let's have the pastors meet with the mayor. But that grew into what's now a quarterly meeting of Fitchburg faith community people, of city employees, the mayor, and also social service workers. And so it's a chance to exchange information about what's going on, where are ways that people might get involved. It's connected the churches in Fitchburg in a really neat way that doesn't happen in a lot of places, where you have a real spectrum of denominations, from liberal, which would be where Memorial United Church of Christ is, to more conservative, where people get together and work together on common issues for the city.
Sounds wonderful, because of the ability for different groups to feel that sense of cooperation and a place to do that.
Right. And it's built relationships among the leaders of those congregations who might not otherwise hang out together.
Wonderful work. So I'm just going to kind of have you reflect back as your tenure as pastor at Memorial. What's given you the greatest challenges, and where have you felt the most blessings?
I think the challenges are always, and part of it is internal, trying to sustain the life of the congregation. It was a really healthy congregation when I got there. Bonnie Van Orbeek, who'd been the pastor there before me, had done a really good job of helping grow the congregation. So my first goal was, don't mess up what she's done. I think I succeeded in that. And then trying to figure out how do we keep expanding. And there are some things we decided to stop doing because they weren't working so well anymore, and try some new things. But that always is difficult to make those kinds of switches, to do things in different ways. It takes time talking with people. So I think those are some of the biggest challenges, as well as just, people's individual crises that you have to deal with, is hard work. The joy is sort of the flip side of that. As we were able to get new things going, I mentioned the work with other Fitchburg churches and with the city and social service people around here. Watching some of our programs expand, just getting to know the people at Memorial, really neat folks there, and developing really good relationships with them. I get to sing in the choir. That was cool. So yeah, and I love the opportunity to lead worship and to preach and to do that sort of church, that pastory kind of thing that you do. So that was really a joy. And it was a good place to be doing that.
Great. Well, thank you for bringing out those challenges and blessings that are so much a part of being pastor. So as the Historical Society, of course, speaking from that viewpoint, we could look at Memorial United Church of Christ. What shifts have you seen in the church in terms of maybe membership, services, relationship to the community, and then maybe thinking of what does the future hold, do you think?
Yeah.
Looking into that crystal ball.
So I think, over time, particularly in the stretch in Fitchburg, some of the DNA of Memorial go way back to the beginning. In the 1920s, they were sending people to Japan to work with folks in Japan. So that sense of outreach has always been a part of the life of the congregation, but it ebbs and flows depending on the folks who are there and the interest. Going back in the years before the church came to Fitchburg, it got involved in things like Madison Urban Ministry and the hospice program and such. Then it moved on to reach out even more internationally, partnerships with the church in Bethlehem on the West Bank, and to do some international things, to be working with a mission project in Biloxi, Mississippi, and sending people to go down there, plus the things that were going on here. That would draw people in. There's also an aging process that happens in a congregation, and as people got older and got less involved, younger people had to come in and take their place. One of the great phrases at Memorial is, when the church moved out here, people who were part of that move said, "We are starting over in a new place. We will not say we've always done it this way," which is often a curse in churches, that people say, "Well, we can't change it because we've always done it this way." And Memorial has really sustained that spirit. I was gone when the pandemic hit, but I think for all congregations, that was a real challenge. Memorial did a good job of pivoting to doing things online. They had some good tech people who could help with that, including the woman who's now the pastor, Chris Gorton, who is tech savvy and could work with that. But that shifted the ground under the congregation. I think, some people, when you learned you didn't have to go to church every Sunday, you begin to create other patterns. So there were challenges in how do you sustain the life of a congregation. But something that's happened just recently that's very neat. I mentioned Arbor Covenant Church in passing. Arbor Covenant and Memorial have now joined together in one congregation at Memorial. Peter Morris, who was the pastor at Arbor Covenant, is now co-pastor at Memorial, and the two congregations are working together. Arbor Covenant is developing itself as a community center, where there'll be a variety of things. It's still a work in progress. The Essentials Pantry will stay there. Open Doors for Refugees, which works with refugee families, will be headquartered there. Other things are happening like that. So there's always this constant kind of shifting going on to respond to whatever is happening in the world around us.
So the changes, being aware of the changes,
Yes.
and being able to shift and do
And to
that
respond.
pivoting and responding to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. That's great. Well, Phil, I'd like to just thank you so much for the interview today, for your service as both a journalist, long career, distinguished career as a journalist, and then as a pastor and a person of faith. And then I would like to just tell people about our Fitchburg Historical Society and our website, which is available at any time for people to go on fitchburghistory.org and learn a lot more about Fitchburg, its origins, what's going on now, the people who've been involved in this community, just lots of good stories and information on our historical site also.
You all are doing really good work.
Thank you. Thank you, Phil.